Good morning, students. Hope you're all doing well. Now, in today's video lecture, we'll begin with the revision of our next chapter, which is Kings, Farmers, and Towns. The kings representing the political history, the farmers in town representing the economic history of the period 600 BCE, which is the Mahajan Path era, till 600 CE, that is, till the end of Gupta age. Now, we also know that this period, this 1 millennium, is known as the second phase of urbanization in India. Which was the first phase? It was the mature phase of Harappan culture. That mature phase has been given the title of, it holds the title of being the first phase of civilization within the Indian subcontinent. Now, what are some of the developments that took place within the Indian subcontinent after the collapse of Harappan civilization? So right after the collapse of Harappan civilization, we have a span of 1500 years. तो इस 1500 years के बीच में क्या हुआ? Let's look into that. Okay. Now, right after the collapse of Indus Valley civilization, you do have a new culture or a new age dawning in India. It was called the Vedic age. Now, the origin of Vedic people is believed to be from that of Central Asia. These people arrived from Central Asia, they came to India, settled around Indus and its tributaries first, and made their homes. They also managed to compose their own literature or text. Okay, and the first text that they composed, keep in your mind, composed, not written down, was the Rig Veda. Okay, so Rig Veda holds the title, esteemed title, of being the first Veda among all the other Vedas. There are there are few more, which are Rig Veda, Atharved, Yajurved, and Samved. Okay, there are 4 Vedas, and so these Vedas were basically hymns composed by the Vedic sages in order to worship or ask for bountiful blessings from their gods such as Indra, Agni, or Som. Next development that took place was that agricultural settlements, it emerged throughout the Indian subcontinent, not only in north but also in the Deccan part. किसी भी इंडिया के डेक्कन पार्ट को हम लोग कैसे मानेंगे? सी देयर इज अ कट ऑफ लाइन, विंध्या रेंजेस. ओके, ज्योग्राफी में you might have heard about a lot of hill or ranges or mountains. One such as Vindhyas, which divides India into northern and the southern half. So the land beyond the Vindhya ranges to the south of it, and you have the Indian peninsula. So that entire land will be called the South India. So throughout this region, people adopted an agricultural way of life that became their main livelihood. That means more and more people were engaged in agriculture, and in order to do agriculture, you need to settle down. You cannot carry on with the nomadic way of life. So people settled down. There was a lot of village communities that were proliferating at that time. Okay, so this was one more thing. Now, that does not mean that there were not other groups that were existing. There were hunter gatherers, there were nomads or pastoralists, but these started to live on the fringes. Mainstream group kya ban gaya? The agriculturalists. Furthermore, you have new modes of disposal of dead in the South India. Okay, so what is this? We have already spoken about it. We'll just go and do a quick overview. See, if the dead are buried, we have already stated the fact that it believes that people do believe in an afterlife. That is, they do believe in life after death. So in South India, there was a new practice that when the dead were buried, huge stones, okay, large stones, megaliths, were erected across the grave, either in geometrical pattern or in the form of chamber. जैसे अभी के ज़माने में ग्रेव में टूम स्टोन्स होता है, वैसे उस समय मेगालिथ्स वर erected. Okay, and the dead were usually buried with their belongings, which might have consisted of tools or weapons. Most of these were iron tools or weapons. So this indicated the fact that iron, or the use of iron, was becoming more and more commonplace, not only in North India but also in South India. Now, now let us look into the developments that took place during the Mahajan Path era. Okay, the most visible development that can be seen is the emergence of early states, kingdoms, and later on empires. Now, while we study the chapter, it becomes more and more clear how it happened. For example, Magad started off as a Mahajanpad, then it became a kingdom, okay, as they started conquering the neighboring Mahajanpads, and finally it became a pan India empire during the Mauryan times. Then we'll also look into the fact how the kings or the emperor, they provided an impetus so that agriculture was organized. Therefore new towns came into existence. Okay, it was through the effort of the state or the king that these things happened at a much faster pace. So, what are the sources to understand this development? Okay, do keep in mind the sources available are, for the first time, we'll be talking about inscriptions, whether they are on the rocks or pillars. Second, we have coins coming into circulation, so that will also prove to be an important source. Then, we do have texts, written text, for the first time. Okay, so that is also an important source. So these are the few of the important sources that we need to study while we are doing the Mahajanpad era. Princip and Piyadas. So James Princip was one of the officers in English East India Company, and he was working in the mint department. So what he managed to achieve became very momentous for Indian epigraphy. Epigraphy means study of inscriptions. So James Princip was able to decipher two of the very widely used scripts in the Ashokan inscriptions. Okay, what were these two scripts? Brahmi and Kharoshti. Brahmi was used in central India as well as in the eastern part of India, so it was widespread. Whereas Kharoshti was used in the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent during the Mahajanpad era or the Mauryan period. So once these scripts were deciphered, it was like a key was opened to read the mysteries that was written on the inscriptions. So while studying these inscriptions, the scholars were able to draw a complete picture with the help of inscriptions, and then they could read the coins, and then the Chinese Buddhist text, everything combined, we could get a much more clearer picture about the entire subcontinent during that time. So it is through these inscriptions that we came to know that these inscriptions regularly mentioned a term which was called Piyadasi, okay, which was later corroborated with other inscriptions, and it was concluded that this term Piyadasi referred to the king Ashok of the Mauryan dynasty, who was very much exemplified even in the Buddhist text. So it was through these inscriptions and with other texts that historians or scholars were able to chart or map out the political history of Indian subcontinent during this Mahajanpad era and beyond. What do we have as a result is that the lineage or the major dynasties that ruled the Indian subcontinent, they were all in place. एक timeline create हो गया था where each dynasty which ruled or who were the rulers under it was clearly and chronologically it was framed. So this was the beginning. Once the political history was established, the next thing that the scholars did, they tried to see whether this political history had any impact in the social and economic changes that were taking place within the subcontinent during that period. Okay. Let us now look into the developments that were taking place from 6th century onwards. Okay, जिसको महाजनपद एरा भी बोलते हैं, उसके अलावा भी क्या क्या डेवलपमेंट्स हुआ. The first thing, obviously, as the name suggests, the era of early states or Mahajanpad began. Mahajanpad को break down करेंगे तो क्या होगा? Maha means, it is denoting the numerical strength, that is the population. Jan means people, and Pad means the footprint. So it is basically talking about the foothold of the people. So you have beginning of Mahajanpads. Then you have the system of coins that came into existence. Coins came into circulation around 600 BCE to 500 BC. Exact date नहीं ले सकते. So listen, in history you do have to keep in mind, whenever an event is asked, obviously जैसे non-cooperation movement or civil disobedience movement, you can give an exact year or a date. But when it comes to a process, ठीक है, you don't have to give an exact date. वो थोड़े centuries ऊपर नीचे भी चलता है, because we even historians for sure they don't know exactly कब हुआ था. So it is around 6th century BCE or 5th century BCE that you have the development of coinage taking place. Okay, and they were the punch marked coins. What are these? We'll study it later. Then we've already spoken about how iron was discovered around 1000 BCE, but it took some time for the distributive network to be established so that people could use iron on a larger scale. Okay, and finally, in the realm of intellectual development, you have a lot of religious sects coming into existence, and some of these religious sects became so prominent that they developed as fully functioning religions later on. Okay, and we already know two of them, Buddhism and Jainism. So usually there are a list of 16 Mahajanpad given. Each Mahajanpad had a capital of its own which is fortified. So you don't need to know all the Mahajanpads, but a few important ones are given in your book. Make a note of it. Please remember them. Let us now look into the polity that existed within this Mahajanpads. Okay, so there were two kinds of polity. One was that the Mahajanpad could be ruled by the kings or monarchs who were hereditary. Okay, that means the crown passed from one generation to another by the sons. Okay, or they could be ruled by Gana or Sangha. This Gana or Sangha is an oligarchy which consisted of leaders of, you can say, a tribe or a leader of that place who was given a seat at the assembly of Gana or Sangha. Okay, and this leader was usually Kshatriya by caste, and he was also known as Rajan or Raja. So a Gana or a Sangha could have a lot more members ruling than a single person. So rather than a single point of power, they have multiple people sharing the power, and like an oligarchy. So it is also stated that both Mahavira and Buddha belong to such ganas or sangha. And one of the most important sangha given in your book is the Vajji Sangh, which had its capital as Vaishali, and the decisions were taken collectively by the Rajas of that Sangh. What were the sources required to maintain a Mahajanpad? We know for the fact that it was a fortified city. The capital city of a Mahajanpad was fortified. You had army and bureaucracy. So all this requires a huge amount of resources that the state can expend. वो तो expenditure part हुआ, but how do you generate the income? So it is for this that you have dharm sutras coming to the rescue. So these dharm sutras was combined by Brahmins, okay, during the 6th century BCE onwards, and it was written in Sanskrit. So it basically lays down the various rules that a king or a ruler should follow in order to acquire more and more legitimate means of gaining revenue. So what are these ways? Okay, 3 of them are mentioned in your book. Let's see to it. First, the rulers was advised to tax the people following different occupational groups. These could be the agriculturalists, the craft people, the traders. So all those working professional, they needed to be taxed. Taxes could be taken in the form of services from the forest dwellers as well as the pastoralists. Like the forest dwellers could help the state in hunting down the wild animals so that the area of agriculture expanded. Obviously, more agriculture means more revenue for the kingdom or the city state. So, another important feature which was written in Dharma Sutra as a legitimate means of acquiring more wealth by the ruler was attacking neighboring states. So, if you were able to bring the neighboring state under subjugation and exploit their resources, obviously you would be better off. So, Dharma Sutras mentioned that these were the ways in order to increase the revenue of a Mahajan Path by the kings. Now, by doing all this, some of the Mahajanpads became much more powerful than the others, and the most important one among these was Magad. Let's look into some of the features that made Magad the most important among the 16 Mahajanpads. The first reason being Magad was situated in the fertile lands of Gangetic plains. Okay, so they were able to exploit that to their advantage. They even adopted the new way of cultivation of rice, that is, by the method of transplantation of paddy. So, this ensured a greater yield. That means people could be taxed a bit higher in this region, and therefore the state would be better off. Then, when we are talking about Magad, keep in your mind that we are not only talking about the Bihar region, we'll also take into the account the modern day Jharkhand region. We all know even today Jharkhand is minerally very rich. It has rich deposits of coal and iron. So even though in during those times the iron mines were exploited, okay, mining was taking place, and actually the state had a monopoly over mining activities. So वैसे भी earn कर रहा है. एक बार iron tools बन गया, then it was easier to make weapons, okay, which could be used during warfare, or to make tools which could be used in craft work and agricultural production. Next, you have elephants within the Mauryan army. These are the war elephants that were tamed after being captured. Okay, now these war elephants was an important component in in the sense that they were able to intimidate the enemies to the extent that the foreign scholars, the foreign ambassadors, or whoever came, they were simply awed by the fact that there consisted such huge number of elephants in the Mauryan army. Then Ganga and its tributaries provided for a cheap means of communication, for transport and communication. Okay, the riverine routes were navigated in a way that they could be utilized for transporting raw materials or people from one place to another. Then you have the ruthlessly ambitious kings of the various dynasties that ruled the Magad region even before the Mauryas. So they were called ruthless because we have already covered this fact, as they did not hesitate to even kill their own father to obtain the throne. The most famous example of this is Ajat killing his own father. And finally, you have choice of capitals. Okay, so initially you had Rajgir or Rajgrih as the capital of Magad, which already had a natural fortification in the form of hills that surrounded that place. Later on, this capital was shifted from Rajgir to Patliputra. Now, Patliputra was, as you all know, present day Patna, lies on the confluence of river Ganga and Son. So it became easier to command routes of transport and communication from this place. So therefore, choice of capital also plays an important role in strengthening Magad as a important Mahajan Path.